say that in the future, no two ASEAN countries with Jollibee will ever go to war. I hope that you will agree. What do you think? The future is here in the Philippines. Somebody asked me, are you based here or are you based overseas? I think it's my last name. I taught in South Korea for quite some time. My husband is Korean, but in Korea, the wives do not carry their husband's last name. And I said, you know, I'd like to go back to my own country. I think I can make a difference. And all of you who are here, I think you're all heroes and heroines because you provide employment right in the Philippines. And that calls for another big round of applause for all of us who want to keep families together. That's why we want to provide employment right in the Philippines. Thank you so much.
Sheshe. Oh, thank you, Network and Alliance, you know. And now I would like to turn you over to the moderator for this afternoon's discussion, who will, I'm sure, elicit a lot of lively discussions about international expansion. And later we're going to have a question and answer portion, so prepare your questions and write them down. And now I'd like to turn you over to Attorney Dominguez.
Thank you very much, Joey. Good afternoon, friends. I was sitting there among you in the audience earlier, and I noticed that this was where we were going to sit this afternoon. There were going to be three of us with these three wonderful seats. So in my mind, I said, I'll put the speakers here, one over there, one over here, and I'll sit here, lie down, and ask all the questions. After all, it's after lunch. But since they're already there, there's nothing I can do. Anyway, I feel very honored to be here with our two guests who have shared with us what they know about expanding to other markets and penetrating. I love the word, but it's in my crib notes. Let's call it expand. Well, you penetrate and then you expand. So we've, through them, been able to take a closer look at some of those markets, and which hopefully will hold a lot of promise for many of the potential franchisers that are here today. Before we begin the panel discussion, I would like to encourage all of you, after all, these sessions are for your benefit. We encourage all of you to join in and ask your questions over the next 10 minutes or so of our Q&A. So I hereby open the floor to questions. Anyone with a question, you may go right ahead and fire away. Any questions from the audience right now? Well, in anticipation that it was going to be a hard start for you, yeah, I have prepared some questions. Well, it's ladies first. Shall I call you Luz?
Yes.
I mean, doctor is, you know, it's so medical.
I don't cure anyone. I'm not a medical doctor. I'm a doctor who cannot cure myself.
Okay. Now, if I were the owner of a franchise business in the Philippines and I wanted to export that franchise to another country, how would I choose that country, that export market? What would be your advice if I came to you and said, I want to go somewhere, tell me what I should do. What should I look for?
Okay, it can depend on the different factors. Like, I think you saw, I saw the chart, and you said that one of the index that you can choose will be corruption, right? The least corrupt, the more you should be there. Or it's also the political system. I was talking to Mr. Encarnacion, Benji Encarnacion, who used to be with Nestle, and he told me that that's not the index that they looked at. And I was so surprised that they're also in a, you know, Myanmar, Burma is a military, is under military rule. And they said that's one of their best markets and it's doing very well. So I think when you look at markets that you want to expand to, one, first look at the growth rate. And most of the economies in Asia or ASEAN are growing. In fact, Vietnam is growing. And I don't even consider China, because the other day I read an article that says that China started to be associated with products at very, very cheap prices. But now China is no longer cheap. They're now going up the quality level, so the prices are also higher. So when you look at markets where you want to expand, first look at the purchasing power. And I think in Asia, normally we have a growing middle class, so purchasing power is up. Two, look at the number of competitors. If you can be a monopoly in the country where you want to go to, fine. I think that's the best.
Did you hear all that, ladies and gentlemen? If you were going to expand, lovely advice. Lots of, well, not much competition, of course. You pick a place where you'll be the monopoly, and a lot of income, a lot of disposable
Purchasing
income.
power of your consumers.
Power.
Yes.
Yes, and you don't need to look very far. Around us, our countries are precisely that. Let's turn to Chris now. So as I said, there are companies here, Chris, that are looking to expand and maybe would be looking at the U.S. or North America, as you put it earlier. Could you tell us what challenges do you see, both domestic and international brands that are now in North America and or Europe? What are they facing in 2011 and 2010 that you can tell us?
I think that some of the biggest challenges are culturally, there's usually not the biggest challenge. I find that many cultures in the Far East are more risk adverse. They don't want to pull the trigger to go do something, and he who hesitates is lost. And I think that if you're going to do it, you're going to have to make a decision to do it. However, unlike locally, where you can open up a number of locations, and if one does not succeed, it doesn't hurt you, internationally, it will destroy you and your brand, and it's very difficult to re-enter. So I would tell you that if you're going into another market, whether it be North American or European, that you better be able to, and again, please, you must be able to afford to fail. I wouldn't want to risk. And here's why. You've developed a very loyal brand, a good concept in the Philippines. Right? You've created 1 million jobs. You've created 900 systems. You've provided a way of life for people they've never been expanded. It would be a sin to destroy that because you thought you were ready to go somewhere and you didn't succeed in doing so.
While we're on the topic, Chris, of the U.S. and North America, what would you say are the 3 or 4 major things that a franchise that's looking to enter those markets should be aware of?
I think that I always tell people, in our class we talk about what I call the ability factor. List all the words. Is it viable, adaptable? Is it financeable? Is it affordable? Is it profitable? Is it doable? Is it transferable? Is it trainable? The more yeses you can say to all those questions, the chances are that you'd have a better chance at it. But then again, I think that for a foreign market like the U.S., I'm talking you coming over to the U.S. and North America, is I think probably adaptability. For example, Potato Corners in California. He's very fortunate that the logo is even generic enough to adapt to the Western, the U.S. type look. Max's looks. If you look too foreign, and please don't take that as an insult, right, it's very hard to get through our psyche, right, because we're looking for ease, convenience, right, comfort. We don't want to take a lot of risk when it comes to where we go by. I would probably say make sure that you adapt yourself as best as possible to as broad of a market as possible.
Thank you, Chris. I have a hard time looking. Oh, we have a question. Sammy, is that you? There. Please.
Yeah, I'd like to ask Dr. Luz. Yeah. Having come from Saitem, and it's with great respect that I have for Saitem, you started the export of Philippine product. But we seem to be having problem with the DTI Saitem in particular, convincing them that franchise is an export. When they export a franchise like Halo-Halo, 18 domestic product, including ice cream, would be 19. And you get franchise fee, you get royalty fee, so forth and so on. Unlike Singapore, Thailand, Malaysia, they support their franchises when they go abroad. Since Saitem would pay for their trips abroad, they would pay for their booth, and so forth and so on. Can you give us advice, having been an insider of Saitem, how we can get into their psyche, how to convince them? Thank you.
So how to convince the Department of Trade and Industry that franchising is one way to effectively tap international markets? Yeah, because when you speak about modes of entry in international marketing, you actually have franchising as one way and exporting as another way. So I think the mandate of the Department of Trade and Industry has always been to promote exports. Perhaps Mr. Sigawat, he's a veteran here. I've always seen him in the meetings at the Department of Trade and Industry. So he's also an institution there at the Center for International Trade.
Attended a doing business forum with South Africa and the Philippines. And we had people from the Department of Trade and Industry. And again, the topic was, what are we going to export? What do we buy? There was not enough information about the two countries. I actually sat in the audience and I said, has anybody ever thought about our franchises? And it sort of like was a suggestion outside of the box as far as they were concerned. But, they said, we are in fact going to organize a mission to South Africa soon, I think in September or October. And perhaps 2, 3 franchises from the Philippines could go and participate in this thing. Now, can you imagine Africa? Nobody thinks of Africa, but that's where the diamonds are, lots of minerals, the football games. So look at South Africa, but a gateway to 10 countries in Africa that's not yet been looked at.
But Miami
Just a
has
thought.
LeBron James.
Well, yeah, that's right. Anyway, that's just a thought that maybe you guys would like to think about. Maybe I have a question now for you, Chris. And if we're looking at industries, if we were looking at what type of businesses we should take to the U.S., what type of industries do you think would have better appeal or opportunity?
I tell everybody throughout the world, whether I'm in Europe or the U.S., you can always count on industries that service people, parents, kids, or pets.
That's right.
I mean, there's always a need, and to address the Asian portion of it is that I think that sometimes, especially when you go to markets that are different. In other words, if you're coming to a market where if you're used to making X amount of dollars, or excuse me, pesos a day, and you enter a market that's used to making 200 or 300 times that amount, there's a shock. It's an economic shock if you don't prepare for those types of things. So things that are relatively, at least consistent, foods, and like my aunts always tell me, says the best. You know what the Philippines export best? Courtesy and compassion. Like we have senior care facilities in the States that if they were run by Filipinos, all right, would be far superior than we could ever provide ourselves. Half the franchises that will be in business in 20 years from now haven't even been invented yet. Give that a thought. So that so think outside the box what you have, and it doesn't have to be anything that's really existing right now even.
Wow, that's a spark. Franchise from here. Healthcare services. Write that down, guys. You already have a lot of Filipinos that are overseas. You just
You know,
recruit them.
we're the biggest labor sending country in the whole of ASEAN, the Philippines.